My name is Robert McCarter, and I am putting together an exhibit that actually has deep historical roots in Venice. This was an exhibit that was, the original exhibit that I'm inspired by and using was done by Carlo Scarpa in 1972, which is why I am filming this brief introduction in the garden of the Querini Stampaglia. Because Scarpa actually is not physically in this exhibition. He was the curator in 1972 of an exhibition called Quattro Progetti per Venezia. It was 4 projects, 3 of which were probably not going to be built, but 1 which might have been built, possibly 2. And it was a bit of a protest on the part of Scarpa that Venice had the capacity to have people like Frank Lloyd Wright, 1952, Le Corbusier, 1964, Louis Kahn, from 1968 on until his death, and then most recently, 1972, Isamu Noguchi, the great sculptor. They've all been asked to do projects in Venice. Many of the greatest designs that we have are unbuilt, but that doesn't mean that they don't deserve attention and they don't have lessons to offer. And so for me, the 4 projects that are presented in this exhibition, selected by Scarpa in 1972, and now sort of presented in this exhibit, they very much characterize or are qualified by the idea of that's been put forward for this exhibition, which is free space for this Biennale. And the idea that free space is it's a space that may not be in the program. As Kahn would say, maybe it's a space, the greatest room in many buildings is the room that's not in the program, and that the architect needs to discover a space where something can happen that's really important to the program, but maybe isn't something that one is normally qualifying in numbers of square feet or square meters for the program. So each of these buildings in their own way is bringing something new to Venice, but it's also a building that I don't believe would make sense anywhere else. So it's both new and different from Venice, but it also takes a certain quality of Venice and then has read through these very great architects and then represented to Venice in some way, almost as if you see yourself for the first time. This was big subject of discussion during the hospital, which of course would have been something that served everybody in the whole the whole local region, not only some of the mainland as well as the island. And so it would have not been sort of something that was only for a few people to visit. It would be very much belonging to everyone. So Wright's building is a kind of very clever modernist interpretation of a typical organization of a central room with side rooms of the Venetian palace. And Corbusier's hospital is, in fact, many people have argued, one of the most interesting reinterpretations of the Venetian street grid, which of course is without any particular order. It's all about memory, to remember where you're going. And then turning it by using pinwheels, so that one is constantly changing direction, moving up and down on ramps, that you would somehow have a new interpretation of the movement sequence of Venice, but taken off the ground and brought up into the air, and you're walking through the air. In a similar way where there's no long axis that continues, you're constantly having to change course, as you do when you go through the campos here. And then Kahn's building, of course, this notion of the bridge as an inhabited bridge. For him, it was like lifting the campo in Siena, the great bowl of the space in Siena, which he saw as just a kind of a natural auditorium, but lifting it up into the air so that you're up, you see across the rooftops a little bit, and you're also floating over the water. So architecturally it has the quality of that gathering space of the campo in Siena, but architecturally you know immediately by the 2 sides that are all glass that you're floating above the Arsenale and above Venice. And then Noguchi's, again, as I mentioned, in a most interesting way, this notion that you would make a kind of solid earth that we would believe for a moment is a new kind of ground plane, and then we could excavate into it and have an experience that's entirely new to Venice, and it would be it would be a project that one would never build in many other cities, where going underground is a perfectly normal part of the experience. In this case, it would have been unique. It's a playground, so of course Noguchi is speaking first to the children, which, as Oliver van Eyck said, is how you really should, as an architect, always be thinking of the children. But I think it's also very much for the adults, this idea that there could be a place in Venice that we have this experience of almost like a cave, of being able to go into the ground and come out of the ground, or exist in the ground, see the sky but perhaps no view, right next to the ocean and between the ocean and the lagoon.